Happy Friday, lovely writerly people. So I am back, obviously, and it's grey here today. It's pretty gross, I suppose. It's not really raining, it's not really sunny, it's not really anything, it's just grey. So clearly we're heading into the, British winter at some point, which can all be a bit, gruesome and sad and depressing. And so to cheer ourselves up, I think today we are going to talk about prologues and epilogues. Exciting, yes. So I think the thing is, I hear, a lot of sort of writer chat within the community, and people have lots of different opinions on to prologue or whether to epilogue or whether to not. And I think my opinions are somewhat controversial in the writer's field. So yeah, I'm going to share. So let's talk about prologues. Now people can get a bit funny. I like a prologue when it's done right, and that's not saying that I could write one. I don't think I've ever written a prologue on a book, but I think a prologue done really, really well can enhance a book, and it can give you that. The prologues in books that I've read that I've really liked have often as not been kind of like massive flashbacks whereby your characters got to reveal something to you about their past. The best prologues I've read have been short, sort of no more than 3 pages, sort of standard book size pages, and they have often involved a lot more dialogue and very little description. So I think that in itself speaks for prologues that aren't done very well. A prologue is not a place to information dump. It is not a way for you to give 8 pages of backstory and kind of give your reader all the actual physical hard information that they're going to need to get through the book. In my opinion, if you're doing that with a prologue, it means that you've kind of not worked out your plot properly. Because the thing with the prologue, when you do an information dump, is what you are actually doing is you are telling the reader what they need to know to get through the story, because as the writer you can't find a way to get it in the rest of the story as you go, and that is often as not where a prologue falls down. So they often say show don't tell, as from a writer's point of view. So the idea is that the reader should always feel like they are reading from within the character's points of view and from the dialogue that the character gives you. So if at any point the reader feels like they are being updated by the writer because there's stuff about the world or the fantasy or the characters that they need to know before they start, I would say most readers, myself included, will just put the book down and never pick it up again. So it's really, really important to untangle your timeline before you start. That's probably one of the biggest places where it's one of the biggest kind of stopping posts when I write a book where I get stuck before. If I start too early, sometimes you get the shiny new idea and you're like, oh, I'm just going to sit down and get going. So you kind of sit down and hit the keys and it grinds to a halt. And I think that it does that because you can only go so far. I think you can get an idea about a character, or you can kind of create a character in your head, and you know how they, when an idea kind of strikes you and that character rolls around and around like a movie. It's like you're watching movie scenes from their life, or at least that's kind of how it is for me. And so, I mean, absolutely sit down and get those ideas on the page, and you potentially will end up with, a handful of scenes from the book, or at least, again, that's how it is for me. But then what I tend to do is I shelve those ideas and I really wrestle with my plot. I get it down on the paper so I know where those scenes are going. And it's funny how many times I've written scenes absolutely convinced that they're going to be like in chapter 1 and one's going to be at the end. And by the time the book is written, they are totally opposed to opposite ends of the coin, opposite ends of the scale. So the whole point in getting that plot down on paper is so that you can untangle all the knots and get it clear in your head. And I think that's the point of writing a timeline. I find that writing timelines works really, really well for me. Even if, well, not even if, all my timelines span massive amounts of information that never goes into the book. but it helps me to like know my characters and know where my story's going before I start. That said, I am not outlawing the prologue because, you know, like I said, done really, really well, they totally enhance a book. I've never written one because I haven't needed to. I've never written kind of like, maybe if I sort of one day sort of work on epic fantasy or something like that, I've never really needed to slide in, you know, the early days. Because I mean, so it's something to think about before you go and info dump on a prologue that's 4,000 to 5,000 words long and it's like a whole chapter and it's all just tell, info. In my opinion, well-written prologues, lots of dialogue, really, really short, involve your two main characters or a pinnacle moment in one of their lives or the backstory that is going to follow you through one of their lives. But for me, dialogue heavy. So that's my thoughts on prologues. Right then, epilogues. I like an epilogue, so I'm just going to get that out there straight away. I think that an epilogue is a great way to kind of neaten up the ending, because most of us, writerly types, like to kind of finish, I mean, not ambiguously, I write romance, so I am a happy ever after girl. Nothing annoys me more than when I read a book and it leaves me hanging. I just, no. I like things all wrapped up. So hence the reason, you know, romance is best for me. But I like an epilogue on a romance too, because you generally find that the wrap up on a romance, sort of, especially sort of regular romance that is kind of very mainstream, that final chapter is where your couple kind of get it together and they kind of get that happily ever after. But I always just want a little glimpse on, just once everything's settled down. And I think that's one of the reasons why I like an epilogue, because from a reader's point of view, it means I get to be nosy. I get to go back in and see those characters again. I always think epilogues are really useful for adding layers as well. So you take your characters, your hero and your heroine, and you make them suffer all the way through the book, normally with some sex thrown in, but the whole point is that they still kind of never know where they stand and never know where they're going. And in the last couple of chapters, everything kind of, you know, sorts itself out. But I think the epilogue allows you to add layers to those characters where you can kind of peek back in and see how they're living day-to-day life without all the trauma and crisis that the writer spent all that time throwing at them. The other thing I like about epilogues is I've read some really, really great ones where they have been written from a different point of view. So a lot of times with a romance novel, your point of view often as not switches between your hero and your heroine chapter on, chapter off, or some kind of rhythmic formula like that. And sometimes you end up, I've read some great epilogues where they are from the point of view of a secondary character or a parental character, and they give a really nice kind of overview as to what's going on, and it's nice to read in a different voice. The other thing that's really useful about epilogues is if you are writing a series or a trilogy, they are a really useful way to tuck in little facts that are going to lead the reader on to the next book. Now, I'm funny about cliffhangers. I think cliffhangers are really, really useful, but again, they can kind of get my back up if I've got to wait a year for the next book. So I think you need to be, when you put a cliffhanger in an epilogue, as a reader, I like a little bit of cliffhanger, but not a whacking great big, no, I'm going to have to spend a week thinking about it and, you know, panicking about when the book's going to come out. So there's that. So as far as epilogues go, I've written an epilogue for my new book that comes out at the end of October. And, epilogue me up, this happened this week. So my advanced author copy of the paperback came this week. So I'm very, very happy to have it here in my hands. And I have another one of these. I have a second one that I am giving away at the moment on Goodreads. So if you want the opportunity to win one copy before the book goes live, it will be in your mitts by the 26th of October. So I'll tag the links for Goodreads down underneath if you want to go and enter the giveaway. It's totally free. So I've written an epilogue for the second part of my trilogy, and the idea is that it gives you that nice neat little look back round, and it enables you to kind of round out your characters and kind of feel the joy after all the struggle. So that's where I am. Epilogues, yes. Prologues, yes, sort of. And that's all I've got for this Friday's Writerly Chat. I'll see you next week, lovely people.